Good morning, everyone. It is 9 o'clock. We are going to wait just one moment for everyone to get in and be admitted through the waiting room, and then we are going to get started with our presentation. So please hold with us for about one more minute, and then we will get started. Thanks for joining us today. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning for the EDGE Dairy Farmer Cooperative webinar regarding review and analysis of the 2024 elections and what that means for the dairy community. This will be a federally focused webinar on the federal elections. We do have Mr. Michael Torrey from the Torrey Advisory Group here, and he is going to be your expert analyst who is going to walk us through some of the interesting things that have happened this election and give us a status update and then what we might be able to expect moving forward through 2025 and the rest of that congressional cycle and maybe the Trump term. With that, Mr. Michael Torrey, are you ready to take it over? I see that he is muted. Can we move him to be a speaker, please? I'm going to. All right, Michael, why don't you try unmuting yourself now?
Kaboom. Can you hear me?
All right.
It wouldn't let me do anything. Hey, everybody. Are you going to save everybody and not put my picture up there either, or do you want to look at me?
Hang on. I'm going to give you camera allowance.
Be careful what I ask for.
I didn't realize I had all the power. Here we are.
I love your expert analyst. I'm not so sure I'd call myself an expert these days. Every day there's some new information. So it's good to at least meet all of you on the webinar. I feel like it's been a long time since we've done this. And I'm going to have somebody monitor the chat function for me. So if you guys, have a question, throw it in there. And if I can't catch it, Karen or Cassandra, let me know. I will say this about this election. I feel like everybody, it was going to be a close election. Everybody was worried about a contentious after election in terms of vote counting and controversy. And I think when I was up with the board of directors during Worldwide Dairy Expo, one of the things we talked about is whether it goes left or whether it goes right. I think everyone would find a certain comfort if it went with a margin that took some of those things off the table. And of course, that's what happened. On this slide here, the reason Cassandra pulled this together, and the reason I like this is we keep hearing these words, that storm was 1 in 100 years, and this new event was 1 in 100 years. And so when I looked at this, I thought, well, that's pretty funny, because these are both 1 in 100-year events. Trump leaving and coming back, that was 125 years ago. We had a Democrat who didn't go through the normal nomination process. With a lot of historic things happening, and I'm just going to back up a second and say this before we get started. First of all, please know how much we appreciate the opportunity to work for you. Thank you for that. And secondly, I think more now than ever before, I need to again use the word space for grace. I have found that in DC and admittedly here, it's a very heavy Democratic population. but I have found myself saying things and somebody's upset and I don't even know what I just said or did. So if anybody, gets concerned about something I said, just know that I'm not trying to be intentional in any of that. So at the end of the day, the question here is what happened in this election? And I think before we talk about that, let's take a look at the next slide, Karen, because I think this really outlines the importance of having an organization that, oh, I can go off camera. Look at that. Okay, there you go. So having an organization that's going to be steady in the pocket, no matter what happens. And some of you have seen this before. So look at this, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. This chart reflects a change in the majority of either the House or the Senate or the White House. And how few times that happened in those decades. We have now had a change in party control in the last 6 elections. Since 2000, we've had it in every election except 2. So that volatility, always a new chair, always a new speaker, always a new president. It's just how do you create stability for your organization or your industry? And that's, as we always say, that goes back to the blocking and the tackling, which I think Curb does very well. Karen, let's go to the next slide, if we may. Okay, so presidential race. Here's kind of an overview of what happened. Let me just start by stating the obvious. That's the final count on the Electoral College. In 2020, Trump had 232 votes. This time he had 212. And of course, Biden in 2020 had 306 votes. And this time Harris picked up 226. Obviously they're calling this quite a comeback for Donald Trump. Some of you may recall, a similar comeback in a different way when Richard Nixon lost the California governor's race and said, you won't have me to kick around anymore. And then, of course, he goes on to be president. Here's the thing that I found fascinating. If you look at the popular vote, in 2020, Trump had 74 million. Now he's at 75. In 2020, Biden had 81 million. Harris got 71. That is a huge gap. And I think as more analysis comes in, it's going to be interesting to see where all those votes went. What were people doing in the ballot box? Of course, Trump won the swing states. We know that. But the interesting thing in all of this to me is the split tickets. The states where we had a member, Trump won the state and someone else won the Senate. And we'll get into that. But that happened like up there by you guys, Michigan. Slotkin won and beat her opponent, a Republican, by 18,000 votes, and Trump won the state. So, there were some general trend lines happening out there. The rural votes, going back to 2016, 57% for Trump, and he moved that needle over the last several years to 67%. And of course, you're in the heart of where that happened in Wisconsin. I cannot talk about this without talking about the polls. They missed it again. In 2000, polls are they call your number at home. And the polls, the participation rate on those polls was 35%. This time it was 1% to 2%. There's a firm that got it right, and they went and did a little piece in the Wall Street Journal and said what we did differently is we went online and we went through, a lot of different social media platforms where they were able to get more direct and better results, and they missed it by 1%. I don't know when polling is going to have their day of reckoning. I think we all agree it probably should have happened by now. And finally, on the money thing, Harris raised $1 billion in 100 days. She spent $950 million. Trump raised $380 million, spent $350 million. You used to think you could buy a race, maybe not anymore with those numbers. Outside groups spent $10 billion, and of that, the Democrats allocated about $1 billion more than the Republicans did in terms of what they raised. So I don't know. And then the other thing I would say, if you think about general themes, and I'm not offering this to be anything other than I thought these words kind of summed it up on exit polls. Asked to describe the candidates in one word as they were talking about how they voted. The word that came across was Trump was crazy and Harris was preachy. And maybe that is kind of the words that filtered down through the electorate, not to oversimplify it. But, there was just a lot of things happening there that didn't make sense. And I think they'll be analyzing this for a while. Let's go to the Senate. Karen, please. All right. So you're coming into this election, obviously, Republicans were in the minority. When West Virginia, Jim Justice, who had been a popular governor, decided to run after Joe Manchin, who had been kind of a conservative Democrat, decided to step out of the race. That moved it to 50-50. Republicans had a lot fewer seats that were in jeopardy. And so I think everybody kind of thought Republicans would get the majority. The surprise was 53. There were some seats both on the Republican side that folks were worried about. Nebraska, there was a late surge against farmer, senator, Republican Deb Fischer by an independent, but she was able to prevail. Down in Texas, Ted Cruz is the second most hated senator in the country behind Mitch McConnell. It was thought that he had a race. He won by 900,000 votes. But then if you go up into some of these other seats in Ohio, the poll numbers were not as strong for Bernie Moreno as they thought they should be. And I think there were folks that thought that Sherrod Brown, a member of the Ag Committee, would probably survive that race. He did not. In Montana, John Tester, another farmer, was beat by Tim Sheehy. And then, of course, in Pennsylvania, Casey, who's been a former governor, a senator on the Ag Committee, he lost to Dave McCormick. Now that is being challenged because the margin is less than 0.5%. Earlier in the week, Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, said he would not allow McCormick to come and do orientation, but that's since changed. That'll go through, whatever legal process they need to go through in Pennsylvania. But right now, folks feel confident 53-47. And of course, in the Senate today, the big news is that Senate Republicans will be electing their new leader. John Cornyn from Texas, John Thune, that many of you know from South Dakota. And then there's been a bit of a surge by Rick Scott from Florida. Rick Scott ran the National Republican Senatorial Committee last time. It did not go well. The MAGA world has tried to get behind Rick Scott to be the leader. Republican senators that work with Rick Scott are not a fan of his. It's a secret ballot. We will see. Trump put as a condition for the leader the issue of recess appointments. I'm happy to get into that in chat if you want. But the bottom line is Trump, when he was trying to move his nominees through the Senate, it took the Senate 2 times longer than any other president to get his nominees confirmed. With 53 Republicans, I think his hope is that he can get a lot of his nominations through. But if he can't, he wants to invoke recess appointments. It's been done 16 times before. Trump never exercised it last time. Biden never exercised it, but it'll be something to kind of watch. House? Okay. So Cassandra, Karen, apologies to you. I know Cassandra and we were having to redo these charts. All I know, the numbers may have changed since we put this chart out there. So this is where we are. It's looking like Republicans will take the House. The magic number is 218. I would say the Republicans at 216 right now. They did flip seats in Michigan and Pennsylvania from Democrat to Republican. The House Democrats at 207. They flipped seats. They flipped 5 in New York, Alabama, California, maybe Oregon. We'll see. But there's 12 seats left to be called. There are Republicans are leading in 6 of the 12 seats, and Democrats are leading in 6 of the Democratic seats. So at the end of the day, maybe Republicans get 222 seats. The bottom line is it's going to be a tight margin. Trump has already taken 2 House Republicans that just got elected into his cabinet. That gives the Republicans a tighter margin. That tighter margin will not occur until after Trump is inaugurated. Those Republicans will keep those seats so that they can vote for the speaker in early January. There's been some speculation that he might take G.T. Thompson into the cabinet. We've been told that maybe that won't be the case. We shall see. I think the real thing to watch going forward is, will all the Republicans fall in line with this narrow of a margin behind the Trump agenda? And that's an unknown. We just saw a Republican from Indiana today say she will not be told what to do with the Trump votes. So that's going to play out. And of course, the speaker election is today, but that's in conference. That's among Republicans only. The one that you watch will be the one that they do in January when they come back, when it's in front of the full House with Republicans and Democrats. Ag Committee. Let's go to Ag Committee real quick. Okay, so that's pretty explanatory, but just to kind of walk through this a little bit, House Ag Committee made up of 28 Republicans, 24 Democrats. Molinaro up there in New York, a Republican, he lost. Duarte, California, freshman Republican, he's winning so far. It's a tough district. And then, of course, Chavez de Romer from Oregon, she's also losing to a Democrat. We will see some changes on the Ag Committee, even though they always appoint a new Ag Committee, right, at the beginning of each Congress. On the Democrats, they've also had some challenges with some uncalled races. Costa, many of you know, he's winning, a Democrat. And also Yadira Caravello, she is losing to a Republican. But this will all continue to play out. Over on the Senate side, I covered some of this. 6 of those seats were up for election. Indiana was open, so Banks left the Ag Committee. He's going to be governor. We talked about the Slotkin race, and of course, Sherrod Brown was on the committee, and that flipped to a Republican. Let's go to the next. Ag Committee, I'll be quick on this. Look, these are the names that you know now. We think Bozeman will be the chair. I think everybody's kind of hoping that Klobuchar from Minnesota will ascend and succeed Debbie Stabenow, although in the ranking capacity. GT will probably remain as chair. Well, right now, David Scott, there's been a lot of rumors about whether the Democrats would pick another Democratic leader of the committee. We shall see. I don't want to speculate too much, but if I had to guess, they will. But we shall see. There's some other folks that have been kind of angling for that. I think at the same time wanting to be sensitive to David Scott. Karen, let's keep going. Okay, let's move on to the lame duck and what's going to happen. So let's start with key dates. Next slide. Sorry, Karen. All right, so here just kind of lays out what we're looking at. Again, it's somewhat self-explanatory. The leadership elections are the day on the Republican side, House and Senate. We also know the day, by the way, Trump is in town. President-elect Trump is in town. He'll be at the White House. He'll be meeting with House Republicans. Wouldn't surprise me a bit if he doesn't end up talking to Democrats. But he's kind of in town doing his meetings. They're back. The continuing resolution runs out on December 20th. Remember that there's a lot of Republicans and Democrats lost their race, retired. Their appetite for doing a lot of things is low. Normally, Congress tries to clear the deck for the incoming administration. So normally they'd like to say, let's get spending bills and everything done. So when President-elect Trump starts, he's got a clean deck. That's always been kind of a bipartisan privilege offered to the new administration. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll know more in 48 hours if they're going to do a continuing resolution through the end of the year or 3 months or what they're going to do on the farm bill. We should know more. That January 3rd date is what I talked about earlier. Even if the Republicans pass a vote the day that says Johnson will be speaker, the drama happens when Republicans and Democrats go to the floor in front of the cameras and vote. And so hopefully no controversy, could be. Of course, famous January 6th, that's when they count them. And then on the day of the inauguration, I'll come back to the later. And then, of course, the president's budget is due on, why did I think that was March 3rd? February 3rd. So, yeah, those are the dates. Let's keep going. So the lame duck agenda, lame duck being, these guys have won or lost, and they've got to get some business done before the end of the year. We've talked about most of this. Probes. The disaster aid package is one to watch. I mean, obviously with the hurricanes and drought and everything else, there's been a lot of talk about some sort of a disaster package. So we'll see. And then we'll find out if they're going to wrap everything up into one big package and pass it, or whether they're going to kind of do bits and pieces. Let's go to my Brody slide. I don't know if Brody's on today. Oh, next one. There we go. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about this because this is going to drive a lot, and I want to level set for everybody. And if some of you have heard this before, I apologize. So let me just start with the basics. There is the annual budget that the 12 appropriations committees work to pass every year. And that's the when I was talking about continuing resolution, it means they've not passed their spending bills. Last year in 2023, they spent $6.1 trillion as a government, and they brought in 4.4 million in revenue. So they had a budget deficit of 1.7 million, and that goes down to this line on debt. Just to do a quick tutorial again on that, because I love talking about this. Of the 6.1 trillion that they spent last year, most of that was mandatory spending. Congress really can't touch it. It's just automatically out the door. Social Security, Medicare, SNAP, welfare, I mean, all whatever the proper words are. A lot of government programs that spending is on just on automatic. Crop insurance is a mandatory program, for example. But 1.7 of that was discretionary, meaning the appropriations committees touch that spending, and half of that is defense. So when you hear the conversations about Elon Musk and I guess I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce his name. That's bad on me. The other person who ran for president. They're going to have a commission, and we can talk about that if you want, that's going to be looking at how government functions, trying to find savings. And that was announced last night. But here's the deal on debt. So for those of you that are my age, remember the 80s? Reagan went from 1 trillion to 3 trillion, and that was a big deal. We tripled our debt. In the 2000s, they balanced it off. You go over there to 01, that's 9/11. Fast forward to 08, and then you kind of see spending really took off. And then, of course, COVID, and then that's 2020, and then you've seen what's happened there. I offer that because you're going to hear a lot about this debt. The market is going to keep talking about this debt. It's good background to have as we go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So what's going to happen in Trump 2.0? I think on day one, this is just me, I think the president-elect will issue a lot of executive orders. Every new president does. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how many. I'm betting that it's a very high number. I'm betting that it's going to be a record number of executive orders that they issue. I may be wrong. I think we'll be spending that day digging through executive orders when everybody's going to inaugural balls. And there's an ag ball, by the way, trying to find out what just happened and what it means, but we'll see. Some of you have heard the Congressional Review Act. When a new administration comes in, if the previous administration finalized certain rules that hit a certain date, the new Congress has the ability to go back and undo those. Before Trump came in 2016, that had only happened once. During the Trump administration, it was done by Congress 16 times. Moving into the new administration, there are 56 rules that the Biden administration promulgated that are subject to Congressional Review Act. So that'll be something to watch. And if you're going to ask me for a list, I don't have that yet. The team was looking for it. New faces. Each new administration has political appointments. About 4,000. 1,200 of those are Senate confirmed. The Senate's going to be working on confirming them. You've already seen some of the names come out. Who will be the next Secretary of Ag? I want to apologize to Brody and Tim Trotter and a few of you, and your name's not on there. I meant to put it on there. But while I'm sitting here, I'm being texted. It's going to be Kip Tom. Last night I was being texted. It's going to be GT. So this is kind of this churn and burn. I know or know of most of those folks, and we can dig into that. But this is the normal thing. Those of you that have been doing this for a while, there's always, a big list. Heck, there's even people that pay money that want to get their name on that list. So I don't think any of these people have done that, but it happens. So we'll see who it's going to be. They've already had some nominees come out. The team's keeping a long list of that. Rubio is not a done deal. Lee Zeldin, not strong background on EPA matters, but certainly somebody who's loyal to the president and we hear good things about. Of course, I went through some of the announcements today. The Elon Musk task force. Side note, they're saying, and I think we all agree that there needs to be efficiencies in government. But Trump's going to create this entity that's outside the government, and he's given them until July of 2026 to find $2 trillion in savings on how the government functions. There are certainly things the government can do better. Bush had a huge initiative on this, and then 9/11 happened and kind of wrecked that world. But I think we're going to see a lot there. Okay, let's get to the next slide. And these are the ones that I'll do my best to make sense of for everybody. All right. So these are the things that Trump has run on the left. That's on the left. On the right is how they're going to do that. So let's just start with taxes. If you look at the long list of tax policy changes that President-elect Trump talked about, every day there was something new, right? The list just kept growing. No taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security. So if you look at the 10-year cost of all of that, it's anywhere from 4 to 5 trillion to 10 trillion. I think what's going to happen is the president-elect and his team and the Congress are going to have to pick a number on how much they're willing to spend on passing all of their initiatives. Republicans in the House and Senate have said they are willing to engage in deficit spending. They're not going to need to offset all of this spending. Now, I think that'll play out a little bit. We shall see. One of the ways they're talking about doing that is through tariffs. So I'll skip on there on the third priorities. I'll skip down to trade and tariffs. This is Cassandra's expertise, not mine, but let me try to pretend like I know what I'm doing here. So tariffs, some of you, well, other than one of you, you only read about Smoot-Hawley back in 1930, but you've heard that, where Congress passed Smoot-Hawley Act that implemented by congressional action tariffs. Then when Roosevelt came in, and that was under the Hoover administration, and we all know what happened after 1930. And then when Roosevelt came in, they changed the law and they gave that tariff authority back to the president. So what you have seen is a conversation happening between former USTR Ambassador Bob Lighthizer and Jason Smith, who right now chairs House Ways and Means, the tax writing committee. They've been saying, hey, we're going to legislate some of these tariffs. So that one is something to watch carefully. 2, tariffs. You've heard the president-elect talk about how they're going to use tariff money to help pay for the tax bill. Now, this is basic math. I know some of you read the Wall Street Journal on a regular basis, so I apologize because you've already seen this. But last year, the country brought in imports worth 3.2 trillion. So let's just say they pass a tax bill that costs 10 trillion, and they want to use tariffs to offset that. Well, that's about a 30% tariff across the board. Now, not all goods are the same, not all tariffs are the same, but that's a lot of tariff revenue that you'd have to raise to pay for your tax bill. I don't know what numbers adjust. I just know that tariffs, obviously, the president-elect is putting people in place in a position to try to move quickly on that. I was in the press today that Lighthizer may indeed be a trade czar, which gives him actually more authority, more broadly based across all agencies rather than just being the ambassador of USTR. So that's something that we're watching. Immigration. I know this is a big one for you guys, and there was a good piece today about just how big it is for dairy. I don't know if Sarah and AgriPulse had it or who had it. But clearly, deportation is the starting point. 13 million, I'm told, are on the eligible list to be deported. I don't know if they do 500,000. I don't know if they do 1 million. I don't know if they do 10 million. I just know that in agriculture, it's a concern and something to watch closely. Here's what I hope happens. Here's what I think will happen because politics will demand it. They have an immigration bill that they were unsuccessful in passing last year. They went to poor James Lankford and asked him to do it, and he did it, and then everybody attacked him, including Trump. They have a starting point. Do they start on deportation and at the same time, through the budget process, the reconciliation process, which I'll get to, find more money to build the wall and then pass immigration reform? Do these all kind of knit together in a way that make it, as better as they can to address some of the challenges that all of you have? Don't know, something we're watching closely. The government reorganization, I kind of put that into the Musk world. I will say that July 2026 date is a long ways away. I've gone from thinking that they'd come right out of the chute on government reorganization and now thinking, well, when are they going to get this done? So we'll see. Regulatory reform, the transition team is collecting the list of regulations that they either want to repeal or modify. So that's ongoing. I'm going to come back to Make America Healthy again. So process, here it is. Congress in the new year has to pass a budget. Normally, they wait for the president's budget to come out, and then they pass a budget. In 2017, Congress passed the budget before Trump was inaugurated. You have to pass a budget to do reconciliation. Now, why does reconciliation matter? What do those words mean? As you know, to get a bill through Congress, you have to go through the Senate, which has a 60-vote filibuster. But if you attach something to reconciliation, you only need 50 votes. Obama healthcare was passed through reconciliation. The 2017 tax cuts were passed through reconciliation. So what Congress is looking at, we believe, is reconciliation is where they will attach a lot of their priorities. Those priorities have to have a financial impact. You just can't put something on there. It has to either spend or save money. So that's something we're watching. Budget reconciliation. I've gone over some of these others. I will go back to Make America Healthy again, and I will be thoughtful. So I think some of you have heard me talk about RFK and his Make America Healthy Again initiative. Every day leading up to Election Day, there was something new, right? It's pesticides, it's fluoride, it's ultra-processed food. I mean, there's a whole list, and somebody on the team is kind of pulling together the broad list of everything that RFK is advocating for. RFK went so far as to create a website where he was having people apply for jobs before President-elect Trump was elected to put them in place. Some of the folks in that group, have gone out and kind of leaked news about, that Massey was going to be Secretary of Ag when that wasn't true, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. I think it's very easy to get caught up in all of this noise. And for us, it's kind of sorting through what is true and what is not true. A lot of shoes have been falling on announcements from the president. I think for those in agriculture, I think for those in healthcare, everyone is holding their breath, hoping that he does not get named to be secretary of either one of those agencies. Opposite of that, if he's named a czar, that would give him kind of that broad authority and influence that is of concern. There is, I know, a lot of internal conversations in the transition world about what to do and what not to do. What can RFK be given that's going to not make him upset without doing all of these other things? What we're saying to folks is you got to tell your story, and that we in the food and ag industry have got to avoid creating a circular firing squad. That I think it's important that folks kind of stand together to continue to drive home the point that we have a safe and affordable food supply, and we are based on science, and that works. So this is something that's playing out. I think I'm at the end of my notes. Karen, am I at the end of my notes? Is there another slide? Oh, there we go. Okay. So do we open this up for questions or corrections of anything I
Yes.
said?
I've been monitoring the chat. We don't have
Oh,
anything in the chat, but those of you who are
oh,
participants, if you want to enter something in the chat, or I don't know if you have the function, the ability to raise your hand, I have apparently the magic ability to unmute people. So, if
let's
anyone has a
take,
question,
Karen, can we
let's,
take the slide down so I can try to see
yes,
everybody? Is that possible?
yes,
All
how's that?
righty, let's see here.
Nobody wants to be
Anthony,
on camera, Michael.
oh, I gotta see you guys. And look, if I say anything upset anybody again, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to here.
All right, so feel free to enter any questions you may have in the chat, or if you have tried to raise your hand and don't have that function, if you can type that in the chat too, I can go in and unmute someone.
Cassandra, is there anything while they're thinking about it or needing to get back out and work? Is there anything that I missed that you feel like needs to be dropped in here or got wrong? Or Karen, is there anything you want to throw in there? Okay.
Farm bill. Cassandra says farm bill.
Oh, I didn't talk
And
about the farm bill.
the other thing might be to hit on the IRA and what that means for environmental regulations when it comes
Um,
to climate smart and renewable fuels and things along those lines.
let's see. So farm bill timing. I don't think they'll get a farm bill done this year. I think it's going to be interesting to watch if they do it next year, if they extend it for 2 years. Funding, we know that if they go to the new year, the Congressional Budget Office is going to adjust the baseline, and that baseline will probably reflect IRA funds being less of in the outlook of the baseline. I have not read my talkers, Karen, on the two questions you just asked. That's the sort of thing that Cassandra or you normally answer. So probably would defer to you a little bit on that. I've been more focused on these other things and less focused on that. I would say one thing, I've always predicted that this new Congress is going to have a really big fight with the Congressional Budget Office because I think they're going to be giving everybody scores that they don't like. But Congress has the ability to override the Congressional Budget Office if they want. So there's always that too. Okay, what have I missed? And did I just see Lauren or somebody put something in there?
Yeah, Michael, let me tag team on that. I just got back from a conference where we heard a lot of the updates on what we just covered in the
Oh,
webinar. The administration is using all outside think tanks and budget review organizations that are looking at and have put forth differing budget numbers than the Congressional Budget Office. So I do think you're going to see more of that than we have in recent times. So look for that to be an issue with this new incoming administration. Lauren's question was, she's had several farmers ask if the administration can pull away the funds that were awarded through the USDA Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities.
I'd have to ask back if those contracts are annual or if they have an end date that you guys have signed. Congress can normally do that if they want to. I think it's going to be a matter of folks really communicating clearly the importance of those funds and what they're being used for. There was an initiative going into the election that was being funded by a group to build a narrative to protect those funds. We met with them. I think their biggest concern was a Republican sweep because a lot of the work that they had been doing was probably a little bit more left leaning, and they were trying to find right leaning organizations to come out and talk about the importance of it. I've not talked to them. So they have an end date. Okay, well, that's good to know. So yeah, they can do anything they want. I think, look, here's what we need in the Secretary of Ag, and I think you're all going to agree with this. Some of you will remember. Remember when Trump was going to pull out of NAFTA, and Secretary of Ag Perdue asked for a meeting and was denied. And you remember that he got in his car and he went to the White House and he insisted on meeting with the president, and he had a chart to explain to the president why pulling out of NAFTA was a bad idea. And the president reversed course, and the White House staff went crazy. And Navarro, in his book, goes after Perdue, right? So he made everybody mad. Agriculture benefited from the fact that we had a secretary who could tell our story for us in a respectful, thoughtful way. And so the conversations I know on transition have been whoever we pick, it has to be somebody that can go in and defend us. And this is a very good example about why we will need somebody that if they decide to go after those dollars, whoever it is who doesn't know a lot about ag, we need somebody who can go in there and say, hold on here a second. The other thing is typically the White House has had an ag advisor. It's in statute. Ray Starling had that job for a while before they pulled him over to USDA. And I know conversations are being had about who can be in the hallways of the White House every day hearing things like, RFK's going in there and pushing something that hurts agriculture so that we have a person inside doing that. Long answer, Lauren. Very good question. Thank you.
All right, we have about 4 minutes left. If there are any other questions, if you'd like to enter them in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, I can take you off of mute.
I hate that I can't interact with everybody because the question I'd have was, a little surprising, I think, the outcome. And I know that when I was up there with you all, I think we kind of thought on the ground it sounded like Harris. And then to see what happened, nationwide, I think that was the shocker.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we can conclude our election 2024 overview and analysis webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out directly to me. And if I can't answer your questions, I will definitely share them with Mr. Torrey. And thank you for joining us today. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Michael.
Guys all have you bet. I hope you all have a good holiday season and look forward to seeing you when I come out there.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.